It is 0 hour 30, Universal Time. I'm Jim Tedder in Washington. Sudanese rebels have refused to sign a peace agreement aimed at ending the violence in the western area of Darfur. A spokesman for the rebel Justice and Equality movement said changes must be made to the agreement before the group will sign it. Rebel leaders also say they want better terms for joining their forces with the Sudanese army and for disarming private pro-government armed groups. The Sudanese government had said it was ready to accept the agreement. The time limit for action on the African Union negotiated proposal ended Sunday. 3 years of violence in Darfur between government-supported forces and Darfur rebels has killed tens of thousands of people and forced more than 2 million to leave their homes. Thousands of activists have called on the international community to end the violence in Sudan's western Darfur area. They gathered near the United States Capitol in Washington to send their message around the world. The demonstration is one of many being held in cities around the United States. Religious leaders, politicians, and famous athletes attended the protest in Washington to support the victims of suffering in Darfur. Nazi death camp survivor Elie Wiesel spoke at the protest. He called on world leaders to stop the killings. Afghan police have found the body of an Indian worker near where he was kidnapped Friday by the Taliban. His head had been removed. Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and Afghan President Hamid Karzai have strongly condemned the killing in Zabul province. A Taliban spokesman said the communications worker was killed while trying to escape. The Taliban had accused the worker of being a spy for the United States. The group threatened to kill him unless all Indians left Afghanistan. In other news from Afghanistan, a bomb explosion has killed 3 Afghan soldiers in Helmand province. 3 others were reported wounded. Army officials blame Taliban fighters for the attack. The newly re-established parliament in Nepal has agreed to hold elections for members of a special group to write a new constitution. Lawmakers did not set a date for the voting. Earlier, Girija Prasad Koirala was sworn in as the new Prime Minister of Nepal. He called on Maoist rebels to reject violence and join talks to help bring peace to the country. Mr. Koirala is the leader of the Nepali Congress. The group is one of 7 opposition parties that organized a series of huge protests this month. Demonstrators had demanded that King Gyanendra surrender total rule and return a democratic government to Nepal. Officials in Indian Kashmir say suspected Muslim separatists have kidnapped 9 Hindu civilians and killed 4 of them. Local officials say the incident happened in the Udhampur area. Police have recovered the bodies of the 4 dead. They are searching for the 5 hostages. You are listening to the news in VOA Special English. Pakistani officials have released a top assistant to dishonored nuclear scientist Abdul Qadir Khan. The Pakistani military says Mohammad Farooq was permitted to go home last week. He had spent more than 2 years in jail during an investigation into reports of secretly passing nuclear information. Farouk was the last man who remained jailed in connection with the reports. He was the Director General at a uranium enrichment laboratory established by Khan near the capital, Islamabad. Pakistani President Pervez Musharraf pardoned nuclear scientist Khan 2 years ago. The scientist had admitted to passing nuclear secrets to Libya, Iran, and North Korea. American Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice has accused Iran of wasting time in the international dispute over its nuclear program. Ms. Rice says Iran should stop all uranium enrichment activity as ordered by the United Nations Security Council. She also urged Iran to answer international concerns about its nuclear program. Earlier, Iran said the UN nuclear agency could carry out inspections of its uranium enrichment centers if the UN withdraws its threat of restrictions. In Tehran, Iran's top nuclear negotiator said his country will not accept what he called forced UN resolutions. Ali Larijani repeated Iran's plan to improve nuclear technology for peaceful purposes. Iraqi President Jalal Talabani says he is close to reaching agreement to end the violence with 7 armed groups. Mr. Talabani said he met with representatives of the groups and United States officials. He said officials are seeking to hold talks with the groups and to include them in the political process. Mr. Talabani did not name the groups. He did say they do not include Al-Qaeda in Iraq or supporters of Saddam Hussein. Also in Iraq, British officials say a bomb explosion killed 3 people south of Baghdad. 2 others were wounded in the attack against a group of private security vehicles. The officials say they cannot confirm reports that the dead include British citizens. Former American Secretary of State Colin Powell says he told President Bush to increase the number of troops planned for deployment in Iraq. Mr. Powell says he suggested the increase before the United States-led invasion of Iraq. The former official says he gave the same advice to war planners General Tommy Franks and Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice says President Bush considered the advice of aides and military commanders before the invasion plan was approved. She said the Joint Chiefs of Staff guaranteed Mr. Bush that there were enough troops to carry out the invasion. Here again is the major news. Sudanese rebels have refused to sign a peace agreement aimed at ending the violence in the western area of Darfur. Afghan police have found the body of an Indian worker near the place he was kidnapped by the Taliban. And the parliament in Nepal has agreed to hold elections for members of a special group to write a new constitution. And that's the news in VOA Special English. From Washington, Jim Tedder reporting.